Welcome to the next recording of Fablehaven. What are we on, number 8? I believe it is 8. When they responded to the call for dinner, a stranger sat at the table along with Grandpa and Dale. The stranger stood when they entered. Don't forget also, the name of the chapter was Maddox. Okay. He was taller than Grandpa and much broader, with curly brown hair. The layers of furry skins he wore made him look like a mountain man. He was missing the bottom of one earlobe. "Kids, this is Maddox Fisk," Grandpa said. "Maddox, meet my grandchildren, Kendra and Seth." Kendra shook the man's calloused, thick-fingered hand. "Do you work here too?" Seth asked. "Maddox is a fairy broker," Grandpa said. "Among other things," Maddox added. "Call fairies my specialty." "You sell fairies?" Kendra asked, taking a seat. "Trap them, buy them, trade them, sell them, all of the above." "How do you trap them?" Seth asked. "A man has to keep his trade secrets private," Maddox said, taking a bite of pork roast. "Let me tell you, apprehending a fairy is no easy task. Slippery critters. The trick usually involves appealing to their vanity. Even then, takes quite a bit of know-how." "Could you use an apprentice?" Seth inquired. "Hold that thought, about 6 years," Maddox winked at Kendra. "Who buys fairies?" Kendra asked. "Folks who run preserves, like your granddad. A few private collectors, other brokers." "Are there lots of preserves?" Seth asked. "Dozens," Maddox replied. "They're on all 7 continents." "Even Antarctica?" Kendra asked. 2 in Antarctica, although 1 is underground. Harsh environment, perfect for certain species, though. Kendra swallowed a bite of pork. "What keeps people from discovering the sanctuaries?" "There has been a worldwide network of dedicated people keeping the preserve secret for thousands of years," Grandpa said. "They are backed by ancient fortunes held in trust. Bribes get paid. Locations are changed when necessary." "Helps that most folks are unable to see the little critters," Maddox said. "With the right licenses, you can get butterflies through customs. When you can't, there are other ways to cross borders." "The preserves are the final refuge for many ancient and wonderful species," Grandpa said. "The goal is to prevent these wondrous beings from passing out of existence." "Amen," Maddox said. "You have a good haul this season?" Dale asked. "As far as trapping goes, pickings are getting slimmer every year. I made a few exciting finds in the wild. One you won't believe. I picked up several rare specimens from preserves in Southeast Asia and Indonesia. I'm sure we can do some trading. I'll tell you more when we adjourn to the study." "You kids would be welcome to join us," Grandpa said. "All right," Seth cheered. Bubble in my throat. Kendra took another bite of the succulent pork roast. Everything Lena cooked was outstanding, always perfectly seasoned, typically served with delicious gravies or sauces. Kendra never had any complaints about her mom's cooking, but Lena was in a class all her own. Grandpa and Maddox discussed people Kendra did not know, other individuals involved in the secretive world of fairy aficionados. She wondered if Maddox would ask about Grandma, but it never came up. Maddox repeatedly mentioned the evening star. Grandpa seemed to focus on this news with particular interest. Rumors that the evening star was forming again. A woman who claimed the evening star tried to recruit her. Whispers of an attack by the evening star. What's the evening star, you might ask? Kendra could not resist interjecting. "What's the evening star? It sounds like you're using it as a code word." Maddox glanced uncertainly at Grandpa. Grandpa gave him a nod. "The Society of the Evening Star is an arcane organization that we all hoped had gone extinct decades ago," Maddox explained. "Over the centuries, their relevance has waxed and waned. Seems like just when you think you've seen the last of them, you start hearing rumors again. They are dedicated to overthrowing preserves in order to use them for their own misguided purposes," Grandpa said. Members of the society consort with demons and practitioners of the black arts. Are they going to attack us? Seth asked. Not likely, Grandpa said. The preserves are protected by powerful magic, but I lend an ear to the news all the same. Rarely hurts to be cautious. Why the Evening Star? Kendra asked. It's such a pretty name. The Evening Star ushers in the night. They considered the statement in silence. Lost my place. Maddox wiped his lips with a napkin. Sorry, not a very cheery topic around the dinner table. After supper, Lena cleared the table and they all went to the study. On the way there, Maddox collected several cases and crates from the entry hall. Dale, Seth, and Kendra helped. The cases had perforations, evidently to allow the creatures inside to breathe, but Kendra was unable to see into them. All were locked. Grandpa settled in behind his large desk. Dale and Maddox claimed the oversized armchairs. Lena leaned against the windowsill, and Kendra and Seth found seats on the floor. First off, Maddox said, bending over and unlocking a large black crate. We have some fairies from a preserve on Timor. He opened the hatch, and 8 fairies soared out. 2 tiny ones, not even an inch tall, darted to the window. They were amber in color with wings like flies. One banged the window pane with a minuscule fist. A large fairy, more than 4 inches tall. 4 inches compared to the size of the book. 4 inches, maybe, something like that. Hovered in front of Kendra. She looked like a miniature Pacific Islander with dragonfly wings across her back, as well as tiny wings on her ankles. 3 of the fairies had elaborate butterfly wings with the appearance of stained glass. Another had oily black wings. The last had furry wings, and her body was coated with pale blue fuzz. Whoa, Seth said. That one's all hairy. A downy fountain sprite, found only on the island of Roti, Maddox said. I like the little ones, Kendra said. A more common variety. They haunt the Malaysian peninsula, Maddox said. They're so fast, Kendra said. Why don't they escape? Catching a fairy renders her powerless, Maddox said. Keep her in a cage or a sealed room like this one, and her magic cannot be used to escape. While under confinement, they become fairly docile and obedient. Kendra frowned. How does Grandpa know they will stay in his garden if he buys them? Maddox winked at Grandpa. Get right to the point of this one. He turned back to Kendra. Fairies are highly territorial, non-migratory creatures. Put them in a livable environment and they stay put. Especially an environment like Fablehaven with gardens and plentiful food and other enchanted critters. I'm sure I can find trade for the fountain sprites, Grandpa said. The Banda Sea sunwings are beautiful as well. We can work out the particulars later. Maddox slapped the side of the crate, and the fairies returned. The ones with the stained glass wings took their time drifting lazily. The little ones zoomed in. The fountain sprite floated up to a high corner of the room. Maddox patted the side of the crate again and spat a stern command in a language Kendra did not understand. The fuzzy fairy glided into the container. Next, we have some albino night grifters from Borneo. You hear that loud car? That's what happens when the garage door is open. Out of a case flew 3 milky white fairies, their moth-like wings peppered with flecks of black. Maddox proceeded to display several other groups of distinctive fairies. Then he began showing fairies one at a time. Kendra found a couple of them disgusting. One had thorny wings and a tail. Another was reptilian, covered in scales. Maddox displayed its chameleonic ability to match different backgrounds. Now for my big find, Maddox said, rubbing his hands together. I captured this little lady in an oasis deep in the Gobi Desert. I've only seen one other of her kind. Could we dim the lights? Dale jumped up and shut the lights off. What is she? Grandpa asked. In answer, Maddox opened the final case. Out soared a dazzling fairy with wings like shimmering veils of gold. 3 gleaming feathers streamed beneath her, elegant ribbons of light. She hung gloriously in the center of the room with a regal air. A gin harp? Grandpa said in astonishment. Favor us with a song, I beg you, Maddox said. He repeated the solicitation in another language. The fairy gleamed even brighter, shedding sparks. The music that followed was mesmerizing. The voice made Kendra imagine a multitude of vibrating crystals. The wordless song had the power of an operatic aria mingled with the sweetness of a lullaby. It was longing, beckoning, hopeful, and heartbreaking. They all sat transfixed until the song ended. When it was over, Kendra wanted to applaud, but the moment felt too sacred. Truly, you are magnificent, Maddox said, repeating the compliment again in a foreign tongue. Chinese? He tapped the side of her case, and with a radiant flourish, the fairy was gone. The room felt dim and bleak in her absence. Kendra tried to blink away the splotchy after images. How did you make such a find? Grandpa asked in wonder. I caught wind of some local legends near the Mongolian border. It cost me nearly 2 months of brutal living to track her down. The only other known Jin harp has her own shrine in a Tibetan sanctuary, Grandpa explained. She was thought to be unique. Fairy connoisseurs travel from all corners of the globe to behold her. I can see why, Kendra said. What a singular treat, Maddox. Thank you for bringing her into our home. I'm touring her around the circuit before I take offers, Maddox said. I don't mean to pretend I can afford her, but send me word when she becomes available. Standing up, Grandpa looked at the clock and clapped his hands together. Looks like it's about time for everyone under the age of 30 to head off to bed. But it's early, Seth said. No grousing. I have negotiations to conduct with Maddox tonight. We can't have young people underfoot. You'll need to stay in your room no matter what commotion you hear downstairs. Our negotiations can be a bit spirited. Understood? Yes, Kendra said. I want to negotiate, Seth said. Grandpa shook his head. It's a dull business. You kids, have a good sleep. No matter what you might think you hear, Maddox said as Kendra and Seth departed the study, we are not having fun. Chapter 7, Prisoner in a Jar. The floorboards creaked gently as Kendra and Seth tiptoed down the stairs. Early morning light filtered through closed blinds and drawn curtains. The house was still, the opposite of last night. Beneath their covers in the dark attic the night before, Kendra and Seth had found sleeping impossible as they listened to howling laughter, shattering glass, twittering flutes, slamming doors, and the constant din of shouted conversations. When they opened the door to sneak down and spy on the festivities, Lena was always seated at the front foot of the attic stairs reading a book. Go back to bed, she said each time they attempted a reconnaissance mission. Your grandfather is still negotiating. Eventually, Kendra fell asleep. She believed it was the silence that had finally awakened her in the morning. When she rolled out of bed, Seth arose as well. Now they were creeping down the stairs in hopes of glimpsing the aftermath of the night's revelry. The brass coat rack had toppled in the entry hall, surrounded by hooked triangles of broken glass. A painting lay face down on the floor, frame cracked. A primitive symbol was scrawled on the wall in orange chalk. They passed quietly into the living room. Tables and chairs had been overturned. Lampshades hung crooked and torn. Empty glasses, bottles, and plates lay scattered about, several of them cracked or broken. A ceramic pot lay in pieces around a pile of soil and the remnants of a plant. Food stains appeared at every turn. Melted cheese caked into the carpeting. Tomato sauce dying on the arm of a love seat. A squashed eclair oozing custard all over an ottoman. Grandpa Sorensen was snoring on the couch using a curtain for a blanket. The curtain rod was still attached. He clutched a wooden scepter like a teddy bear. The strange staff was carved with vines twisting around the shaft and topped by a large pine cone. Despite all the commotion they had heard the night before, Grandpa was the only sign of life. Seth roamed off toward the study. Kendra was about to follow when she noticed an envelope on a table near her grandfather. A thick seal of crimson wax had been broken, and part of a folded paper protruded invitingly. Kendra glanced at Grandpa Sorensen. He was facing away from the letter and showed no sign of stirring. If you didn't want a letter read, you shouldn't leave it out in the open, right? It wasn't as if she were stealing it unopened from his mailbox. And she had several unanswered questions about Fablehaven, not the least of which concerned what was actually going on with her grandma. You guys don't like the grandma part. Kendra eased over to the table, a queasy feeling in her stomach. Maybe she should have Seth read it. Invading privacy wasn't really her forte. But it would be so simple. The letter was right in front of her, conveniently sticking out of the open envelope. Nobody would know. She tipped the envelope up and found there was no address or return address. The envelope was blank, hand-delivered. Had Maddox brought it? Probably. After a glance to ensure Grandpa still looked comatose, Kendra slid the cream-colored paper out of the envelope and unfolded it. The message was written in bold script. Stanley, I trust this missive finds you in good health. It has come to our attention that the SES, capital S, capital E, capital S, has been exhibiting unusual activity in the northeast of the United States. We remain uncertain whether they have pinpointed the location of Fablehaven, but one unconfirmed report suggests they are in communication with an individual on your preserve. Mounting evidence implies the secret is out. I need not remind you about the attempted infiltration of a certain preserve in the interior of Brazil last year, nor the significance of that preserve in connection with the significance of yours. As you well know, we have not detected such aggressive activity from the SCS in decades. We are preparing to reassign additional resources to your vicinity. As always, secrecy and misdirection remain top priorities. Be vigilant. I continue to search diligently for a resolution to the situation with Ruth. Do not lose hope. With everlasting fidelity, S, the letter S. Kendra reread the letter. Ruth was her grandma's name. What situation? SCS had to be the Society of the Evening Star. What did the S at the ends of the letter stand for? The entire message seemed a bit vague, probably deliberately. Look at this, Seth whispered from the kitchen. Kendra jumped, every muscle in her body tensing. Grandpa smacked his lips and shifted on the couch. Kendra stood temporarily, immobilized by guilty panic. Seth was not looking at her. He was stooping over something in the kitchen. Grandpa became still again. I'll be quick. Kendra folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope, trying to situate it as she'd found it. Moving stealthily, she joined Seth, who crouched over muddy footprints. Were they riding horses in here, he asked. It would explain the racket, she murmured, trying to sound casual. Lena appeared in the doorway, dressed in a bathrobe, hair awry. Look at you early risers, she said softly. You caught us before cleanup. Kendra stared at Lena, trying to keep her expression unreadable. The housekeeper showed no indication of having seen her spying at the letter. Seth pointed at the hoof prints. What the heck happened? The negotiations went well. Is Maddox still here? Seth asked hopefully. Lena shook her head. He left in a taxi about an hour ago. Let's change that. He left in an Uber about an hour ago. Grandpa Sorensen shuffled into the kitchen wearing boxers, socks, and an undershirt stained with brown mustard. He squinted at them. "What are you doing up at this ungodly hour?" "It's after 7, Seth said. Grandpa covered a yawn with his fist. He held the envelope in the other hand. "I'm feeling a little under the weather today. Might go down for a spell." "As you were." He shambled off, scratching his thigh. "You kids may want to play outside this morning," Lena said. "Your grandfather was up until 40 minutes ago. He had a long night." "I'm going to have a tough time taking Grandpa seriously when he tells us to show respect for the furniture," Kendra said. "It looks like he drove a tractor through here." "Pulled by horses," Seth added. "Maddox enjoys the celebration, and your grandfather is an accommodating host," Lena said. "Without your grandmother here to rein in the merriment, things got a little too festive. Didn't help that they invited the satyrs." She nodded at the muddy footprints. "Satyrs?" Kendra asked. "Like goat men?" Lena nodded. "Some would say they liven up a party too much." "Those are goat prints?" Seth asked. "Satyr prints, yes." "I wish I could have seen them," Seth mourned. "Your parents would be glad you didn't. Satyrs would only teach you bad manners. I think they invented them." "I'm sad we missed the party," Kendra said. "Don't be. It was not a party for young people. As caretaker, your grandfather would never drink, but I can vouch for the satyrs. We'll have a proper party before you leave us." Will you invite satyrs?" Seth asked. "We'll see what your grandfather says," Lena said doubtfully. "Maybe one." Lena opened the refrigerator and poured 2 glasses of milk. "Drink your milk and then run along. I have some heavy cleaning ahead of me." Kendra and Seth took their glasses. Lena opened the pantry, removing a broom and a dustpan, and left the room. Kendra drank her milk in several deep swallows and set her empty glass on the counter. "Want to go for a swim?" she asked. "I'll catch up," Seth said. He still had milk in his glass. Kendra walked away. After finishing his milk, Seth peeked into the pantry. So many shelves, packed with so much food. One shelf featured nothing but large jars of homemade preserves. Closer investigation revealed that the jars were lined up 3 deep. Seth backed out of the pantry and looked around. Re-entering the pantry, he removed a large jar of boysenberry preserves, pulling another jar forward from the second row to disguise the absence. They might miss a half-empty jar from the fridge, but one of many unopened jars from an overstuffed pantry? Not likely. He could be sneakier than Kendra knew. And we'll stop there. Sorry I went a little long, but there's a break in the page right there. Until Friday.